In most of the lessons, we've done things like graphing the conic section, and then we move into working with its equations, okay? In every case, completing the square was a crucial skill. Some of you need to brush up on that because I graded your quizzes and tests from the last time, okay? So we've got to be able to complete the square in X and Y. So let's take a look at this. In order to complete the square, what's the first thing that I do? I move what? X and Y's together, and then the constant does what? Put it on the other side of the equation. So what I'm after this looking like, in this case, I've got a negative with the x squared. So I'm looking for something that looks like this. Either form. Something like this. This is what I'm after. That's the vertical, or it could be horizontal. So I'm after one of these forms. And I would just get in the habit of writing this down as often as you can. That way you don't have to worry about memorizing this formula. If you're always writing it down, it just becomes part of your muscle memory. So let's get all the x's and y's together and the constant on the other term. So negative 16 x squared plus 32x plus 9y squared plus 144y equals 16. Okay. Now what do I have to do? I've got to complete the square in x and y. Okay, so in completing the square, you've got to have an x squared and a y squared. You can't have any number in front, so you have to factor that number out. So what has to be factored out here? Negative 16. Okay, what do you multiply negative 16 by to get negative 16x squared? X squared. What do you multiply negative 16 by so that you get a positive 32x? Negative 2x. Okay, that's where people make a common mistake, is they factored out negative 16, but they didn't change the sign here. So it's negative 16, negative 2x. Okay, you can always check yourself before you go further. Multiply this out. Negative 16x squared. Negative 16 times negative 2, that's 32x. I did that correctly. Now I'm going to leave some space right there. Now what has to be factored out of the next one? So a 9. So it's going to be 9y squared. What do I multiply 9 by to get a 144? 16. So 16y. Okay. So I haven't completed the square yet. I've just got it in the situation now where I can complete the square. Okay, Robert, to complete the square here, what has to happen? You take half of this number. What's half of 2? Okay, so I'm going to add, half of 2 is 1. So I'm going to add 1 squared, okay? You're always adding. What about this one? What's half of 16? No, because when you square it, you get a positive number. It would be negative 1 times negative 1, so it's always going to be positive when you complete the square. What's half of 16? 8, so I need to add 8 squared. Okay. Now you have to pay real close attention. What did I really do here? It looks like I added 1, but what did I really do? I subtracted 16. Okay? If I subtract 16 on the left side of the equation, what has to happen on the right side? I have to subtract 16. Okay? Now, what is this? It looks like that's 64, but it's really 9 times 64. Okay? And 9 times 64 is 576. So I added 576. So these are real crucial steps in completing the square. Take your time, slow down, and realize, yeah, you just added 1, but you really subtracted 16. It looks like you added 64, you really added 576. do the same things on the right side of the equation. So this becomes negative 16. Now what is this? This is x minus 1 squared plus 9 what? Y plus 8 squared equal 576. Okay. What is keeping that from looking like the form that I want it in? I want a 1 right here, right? So what do I have to divide by? Yeah, 576. So, real easy over here, that's 1, okay? So 576 divided by 16. So 576 divided by 16 is 36. So this is negative x minus 1 squared over 36 plus 576 divided by 9. So 576 divided by 9 is 64. Okay, and this is in the form of an ellipse. So usually I write the positive one first. So it's y plus 8 squared over 64 minus x minus 1 squared over 36 equal 1. So horizontal, vertical. This is vertical because the y term is positive. What's the center? 1, negative 8. Okay. And I got to find the vertices. Okay. So first of all, what is A? A is equal to 6. B is equal to 8. Okay. So to find the vertices are going to be horizontal from the center or vertical from the center? Vertical from the center. Okay. So that means I need, which of those will tell me how to get to the vertices, A or B? B will tell me how to get there. It tells me how far to go. 8. So what would happen if you went up 8 from here? Yeah, 1, 0. What happens if you go down 8 from there? Yeah, 1, negative 16. Those are the two vertices of that. Okay? So this is long, this is involved. This is, you got to really focus because one little minus sign, one thing wrong, it starts to go haywire and you don't get nice numbers like 64 and 36. You know, when you start to get these really ugly numbers here, you maybe made a wrong turn somewhere. Okay, so you got to be real careful with the arithmetic in doing that. So like I said, completing the square is with us until you become a junior. Okay, so it's here to stay. Let's look at this. I gave you the graph. Give me back the equation. Okay, first of all, horizontal or vertical? This is, no. Horizontal, you got to wake up. This is a horizontal ellipse. Okay, what's the formula? X minus h squared over a squared. What? Minus y minus k squared over b squared equal 1. What's the center of this ellipse? Yeah, 4, negative 6. How do I figure out what A is? A is the distance from where to where? The center to where? Come on, guys. A, horizontal, vertical. A is always the horizontal distance. So A is going to be the distance from here to here. How far is that? 2. Okay, B. To find B, think about it. If I look at this, okay, B is the vertical. How far is that? That's 3. Okay. So what's the equation here? Okay. X minus 4 squared over 4. Yeah, minus. Over 9 equal 1. Okay. Okay, so it's really knowing the formula, looking at the graph, pulling out. All you need for hyperbola, you need to know if it's horizontal, vertical. You need to know the center, and you need to know A and B, and then you can figure that out. Write the equation for the hyperbola with vertices negative 5, 1, 5, 1, and with endpoints of the conjugate axis 0, 5, and 0, negative 3. What does that mean, conjugate axis? There's a transverse axis and a conjugate axis. What do they mean? Yes. Well, it could be horizontal or vertical, depending on which way the hyperbola is. So guys, let's look at it real quick. So if I've got a hyperbola that looks like this is the transverse axis. And then this is the conjugate axis. Okay? If I've got a vertical hyperbola, one that looks like this is the transverse, and that's the conjugate. Okay? So you got to know that. So let's just graph these points. Negative 5, 1, and 5, 1. What are those points? Those are vertices. So what do I know automatically now about this hyperbola if those are vertices? It's horizontal. So if these are vertices, this is what my situation looks like. Okay? Now, where would the conjugate axis be? Vertical or horizontal? The conjugate would be the vertical. The transverse is horizontal. So it tells me that the conjugate axis has endpoints at 0, 5, and 0, negative 3. Okay? So how do I find, and what do I need to know to write the equation now? I got to find the center, and I've also got to find A and B. Okay, so if it looks like this is the distance, there's a distance of 8 between here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the center. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what is that point? Yeah, so the center is 0, 1. What is A? 5. What is B? B is 4. So what's the equation? First of all, which term is positive, the x term or the y term? The x term is positive, so it's going to be x minus 0. If you need to write x minus 0, that is fine, okay? Over what? 25, and then what? Minus y minus 1, 16, equal 1, okay? You could simplify that to x squared over 25, but I'm okay. If you need to write x minus 0, that's okay. Write the equation of the hyperbola that has vertices 8, 14, and 8, negative 10 with a conjugate axis of 6 units in length. Okay? So, what do you think we need to do? Yeah, there's a graph here to show your work. So that means maybe graph. What am I going to graph? Yeah, 8, 14 is going to be 10. So 6, 7, 8, 14. Gosh, I'm having trouble seeing here. 6, 7, 8, 14, somewhere right there. So that's 8, 14. 8, negative 10. So 8, negative 10 is going to be right here. So what do I know about this hyperbola at this point? It's vertical. So this thing has to look like this. Okay. Okay. So how do you think I'm going to find the center? Yeah, well, it's going to be relative to these points. Where would the center be? What, halfway in between, right? So 14, what's 14 and 10? 24, half of that is 12. So that means if I'm at negative 10, if I go up 12, where do I end up? At 2 right there. So that point 8, 2. So I know that the center is 8, 2. Now, how do I find A and B? So which of the axes, what's the vertical axis? That's the what? Transverse. The conjugate is horizontal. So if it's 6 units in length, that means it's going to go how far on that side and how far on the other side? Yeah, 3 and 3. So that means 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So what is A? A is 3. How do I find B? Come on, guys. B is the what? From the center, it's the what distance? Vertical. How far is it from this point to that vertex? That is 12. So B is 12. And now we're ready to write the equation. So this is a vertical, so who gets the positive sign? Y or X? Y. So it's going to be what? Y. Yeah, Y minus 2 squared over, what goes there, the A or the B? So B squared is what? 144, and then what? Minus, X minus 8 squared over 9. All of that equals 1. Okay? So it's just keeping track and keeping straight all of the terminology, and being able to graphically visualize and be grounded. A is always the horizontal distance from the center. B is always the vertical distance from the center. Okay, last one, then I can turn you loose to do some of this on your own. Write the equation for the hyperbola with vertices 15, 1 and negative 1, 1, endpoints of the conjugate axis 7, 7 and 7, negative 5. So let's graph these points. 15, 1 is right here, and negative 1, 1 is right here. If those are vertices, what do I know? This is horizontal. So if it helps you to draw that, go ahead and draw. So I'm not grading the graph, but you know that's horizontal. Okay. So how can I find the center? The center is going to be what? Relative to those 2 points is the point that's what? Halfway in between. So if I look at it, from negative 1 to 15, what's the distance from negative 1 to 15? 16. What's half of that? 8. So if I were to go 8 in that direction, from negative 1 over 8 would put me at 7. If I add 8 more, I get to 15. So what is that point? Yeah, so it's 7, 1 is the center. Okay. Now, how do I find A and B? A is what? Pardon me? 8, okay, because it's a distance of 8 to get from here to here and to get back to the other vertices, okay? Now, they give me endpoints of the conjugate axis at what? 7, 7. So 7, 7 is right here, and 7, negative 5 is right here. So what does that tell me? What is B? Yeah, b is 6. Okay. Now I'm going to go write the equation. Who gets the positive sign, x or y? X gets the positive sign, so this is what? X what? Yeah, x minus 7 squared over what? Yeah, 64 minus, yeah, y minus 1 squared over, yeah, equal 1. There we go. Okay. So pretty straightforward. So guys, this is, we're 3/4 of the way there with our conic section. We started with circles, then to ellipses, then to hyperbolas, and then when I see you, which will be Friday, we'll start the parabolas. Okay. And that will sort of wind us up to where we need to be for our quiz at the end of next week. Okay?